I like anything with an engine in it, so today let's talk about lawnmowers. John Deere lawnmowers, Cub Cadet lawnmowers, maybe even Murray lawnmowers or Bolens lawnmowers or Bad Boy zero-turn lawnmowers. So I'm going to kind of jump around here, talk about the hydrostatic transmissions, the engines, different models, different things to look out for. So back in the old days, you didn't have a hydrostatic in a lawnmower. You had a regular gear shift manual, just like a car. I can still remember the old Murray with the Briggs and Stratton. Had the gear shift, 4-speed and reverse. Came out right here. Really nothing to break in that transmission. As long as you kept fluid in it, you were going to be fine. These days, though, most everything has a hydrostatic transmission in it. Hydrostatic doesn't have gears. It has swash plates, pistons that move fluid, generate a lot of heat, but they're infinitely variable in speed. Just like a car, you almost got a gas pedal. The farther forward you push it, the faster it goes. You want reverse, you push it in reverse. So I definitely see the appeal to these. That said, they do create a lot of heat. They do come in a lot of different model numbers of hydrostatic transmissions. And let's go over a few right now. So this is a 2010 Cub Cadet. It came with a Hydrogear transmission. Hydrogear is just a company. The other main one is Tuff Torque. So this has a smaller hydrostatic transmission in it than the John Deere. You can see the shafts for the axles. They're less than 1 inch in diameter. I can't get a good view in here, but overall the whole unit is just a little bit smaller gears. There's the cooling fan on top. If you have a hydrostatic transmission, they generate a lot of heat. If that fan breaks, you're probably going to burn up your hydrostatic unit. Let's jump over here to the John Deere x590. This thing has a much beefier axle. This actually has the Tuff Torque K72 in it. It's got a fan to cool it. It's actually got a reserve for the fluid that goes in it. Not even all the Tuff Torque has these. It depends on the model number. So these days, let's just talk about the Tuff Torques. They got the K48. K48 is your entry-level hydrostatic transmission. Small transmission, small gears, cheapest one you buy at Lowe's, Home Depot. Not designed to last the same amount of hours that the bigger ones are. From there, they move up to the K50 series, which is a little stronger. If you get the new Cub Cadet, which this one is not a new one, but if you get the new Cub Cadet GX54D, and that's not to be confused with the SL models, the 54D has a locking differential. You move up to the K62, which is about the biggest hydrostatic transmission you can get in the Cub Cadets. Pretty good, reliable, hydrostatic, not quite as big as the K72 that's in those. So really, it's how much do you want to spend. This is a $10,000 mower. You can buy a new Cub Cadet, which again, this one is not, but I don't have the new XT2 GX54D here. A new GX54D runs around $4,600–4,700. You buy them during winter time, it's just over dealer cost at about $4,100. K62 versus K72 transmission, both pretty beefy. Again, you can also go to Home Depot. You can buy a $1,500 mower. It's going to have like a K48 or something, and it's going to be a little weaker. This Cub is a 2010 model. It's got 484 hours on it. It's been absolutely reliable for me. It starts no matter how cold the weather is outside. I can come out here when it's 40 degrees, put the choke on, it starts right up. Has the Kohler Courage engine. If you read online, some people are not fans of this engine. I have had zero problems with this engine. One thing to know about this engine if you're buying an older one is, I can't take the cover off here, but there's bolts on top of the case that some of them were not tightened down enough. The bolts start to come loose, come up. As soon as they come up high enough in here, the flywheel hits them, snaps them off, destroys the whole engine. So I checked mine. Mine have been torqued. Mine have never backed off. They've worked absolutely flawlessly. This is a carbureted engine. I have never had to clean the carburetor. I have never had to really do anything other than change the oil on this. Check the air filters, giving me zero problems. So if you're not buying one with a Kohler, you're probably buying one with the Kawasaki engine. Kawasaki and Kohler have been around forever. They've been making engines forever. The only unique thing about this Kawasaki is John Deere doesn't want you to know it's Kawasaki, so they call it an iTorque power system, or maybe that's their fuel injection, but they put the John Deere sticker on it. But if you go down here, it's a Kawasaki. However, if you need parts for it and you go to Kawasaki, they're going to tell you you have to go to John Deere and pay twice as much because they signed an agreement with John Deere saying only John Deere can sell parts for these engines, even though 90% of the parts are the same parts. So what might be different? A lot of times the difference between a quote-unquote consumer grade or prosumer model and a commercial grade mower is nothing more than a better air filter, maybe a better oil filter. The bad boy mowers, it's a good example. I had a 16-inch Bad Boy ZT Elite with air ride seat option, which was like $800. So it's an $8,000 mower. It had the same Kohler 747 as you can get in the new 2024 Cub Cadets. The only difference was it had a really big air filter on the back, and they called it commercial grade versus consumer grade. While we're on the topic of zero turns, though, let me tell you why I do not like zero turns. I had that zero turn, and my yard is not level. That's looking straight ahead. So that's about how steep it is. If I start coming down here in my zero turn, say I'd pull the left handle to turn left, all it would do, spin the one tire backwards and keep going straight. Just would not even stop. It was like driving on ice. Zero turn Bad Boy also sat up a lot higher. So I'd come around here, try to mow around this tree right here. One, just because of the angle, it wouldn't want to turn, it would want to spin. But the second thing is, because it's higher and you got handles to steer it instead of a gas pedal, handles would want to run into these branches. Well, guess what? If you're going forward, all of a sudden the branch hits the handle, slams it backwards, you're going to have a bad day because it's going to spin the mower right into the tree. So I have a lot of little trees like this, and that thing's set up so high I could not get under them. I could not go around them. And mowing on a hill was absolutely miserable. Because like I said, it would constantly slide around. Even trying to mow up the hill, it would spin both wheels. It just had no traction. It was so heavy of a mower, it had no traction. It would just spin and spin and spin. So, had that for about a week, got rid of it. I'm sure if you were cutting a flat football field, you didn't have a bunch of little trees, cool. Zero turn is probably a great thing. For what I do, I hated the zero turn. I got rid of it. Will not use it. It's like driving on glass on any kind of hill. So instead, I wanted something with a locking differential. This does not have a locking differential, but the new GX54D does have a locking differential. The SL model is about $1,500 cheaper, does not have a locking differential, has a weaker hydrostatic transmission in it. People probably aren't going to realize that. I would pay the extra $1,500 for the better hydrostatic. Locking differential is just a bonus if you need it. So my plan was to buy a new GX54D. And then, like all things, you come across something on Facebook Marketplace, and next thing you know, you brought it home again. So this is the John Deere x590. They make an x580, an x570. For that, you jump down to 300 series or you jump up to the 700 series. So this is the top of the line x590 series. This has the Kawasaki engine, not the Kohler. The one big thing to me, I know some people are Kawasaki fans and some people are Kohler fans, is the hydraulic lifters in the Kohler engine versus the solid lifters in the Kawasaki engine. Hydraulic lifters, maintenance free, you don't have to adjust them. Solid lifters in here, after say every couple hundred hours, you need to pull this off because your push rods are coming out this way. And your push rods are rocking against a rocker opening your valve this way. Well, if they get too loose, your push rod is going to fall out and fall straight down. I actually had a Bolens lawnmower and that exact same thing happened. I was just driving along, all of a sudden got too loose, push rod fell out. Now one of the valves isn't opening. So you do need to do a little more maintenance on the Kawasaki's. Make sure that the lash is checked every so often on here. The other thing about this one, and I don't know if I'm going to like it or not, it's fuel injected, just like a car. It's not carbureted like most of them. Only the 590s got the fuel injection. The 580s, the 570s did not get the fuel injection. This, I believe, is an open loop system, not a closed loop system, fuel injection wise. So what's that mean? It means it has no oxygen sensor in the exhaust. It just has a pre-programmed fuel map, and it puts that amount of fuel in versus that much temperature. If it was a closed loop system, somewhere in the muffler, which you really can't see, but you can see exhaust pipe there, but somewhere in there you'd have an oxygen sensor. And the computer would get feedback in closed loop telling it, okay, it's running rich, it's running lean, I need to richen up the fuel if it's running lean, I need to lean it out if it's running rich. It does not have that. I don't know if that's going to be an issue or not. I think the bigger issue is fuel injection is great because it's going to start all the time right up until a sensor doesn't work, and then when like a sensor doesn't work or an injector goes out, then you're almost going to need a computer to diagnose it. They do say on these John Deeres on the dash here that if you turn the key and there is a code, which there's not, but if there is, it would actually display the code on the John Deere. I don't have any codes yet, thankfully, so I don't know. If it does display the code, might be able to Google search it and figure it out. This one only has 68 hours on it, so it's like brand new. One other thing on the 590s versus 580s, 570s, the front axles. So this on the 590 is a lot thicker, beefier. The 580 and the 570 use a lot thinner 3 series front end on them. The other thing on the 590 is the power steering. This is nice. This spoils you. Right up until it leaks and doesn't work, this is nice. You can do one finger steering. I'm not used to power steering on these. I'm used to the old school manual. You turn the steering wheel. There's a gear up in there. Turns the wheels manually. So that is a nice upgrade. This also has a hydraulic deck. You can actually just press down, press up, and the deck goes up and down. Most mowers, which how often do you really set the deck height, but most mowers have some kind of lever let the deck down, let the deck up. Again, is it worth paying twice as much for a mower that has that? I don't know. Does have the locking differential. This I wanted. Whether I bought this mower or Cub Cadet or somebody else, I definitely wanted a locking differential, which this has. So if I'm on a hill, one tire's turning, hit that, both tires come together, lock up. Under the seat, John Deere actually has a leveling gauge. I don't know if we can see it here. There's a dimple right here. There's one on the other side, and in front there's just kind of a notch. There's a notch right there you can't see. On concrete, you would actually set the deck at 2.5. You'd put this under it. It should just clear the deck. And then you would take your adjustment tool here. If one side was too high, you'd turn it, raise it and lower it. Same thing over here. Do it the other side, raise it and lower it, and you can level the deck that way. So that is kind of a neat feature. And then the third place, you would just loosen these screws in or out, and you would level the deck from this rod that goes right here. Again, is it worth it? I don't know, but it's a cool feature. So, one other thing I should mention. Maybe you're cross shopping a Craftsman with a Cub Cadet. Well, guess what? They're both owned by MTD. They're both the exact same mowers. A Cub Cadet GX54D is the same mower as a Craftsman T4400. They both have locking differentials. They use the same engine. They use the same hydrostatic. They use the same everything. John Deere is one of the few that still kind of builds their own unique stuff. Granted, they still use the same Kohler and Kawasaki engines everybody uses. Husqvarna is another one that builds their own stuff. They have a K66 hydrostatic, so a little bit more than the K62 hydrostatic in the Cub, but not much. It just has a button on the dash to lock the differential. It's electronic as opposed to stepping on a pedal. So this mower, like I said, it's got 484 hours on it. It's been rock solid. I think I paid $1,000 for it back in 2015. It was used at that point. So I've got 9 years of use out of it for $1,000. This mower, if you brought it new, obviously is 10 grand. You can pick it up used for less, but post-COVID, anything's expensive. So this is still probably a $5,000–6,000 mower even used, and it's hard to find one with this low of hours. You can get on Tractor House, but they're quite expensive. So hopefully this one lasts 9 years like the other one. Hopefully it lasts longer with the K72 hydro and the stronger, hopefully, everything else, but we'll see. I haven't had a Kawasaki engine that much before, other than that bad boy zero turn. But no, I'm sorry, the bad boy had a Kohler 747. So I believe this is the first Kawasaki engine I've had. But I've never had a problem with engines anymore. The biggest problem I ever had was that Bolens motor when that push rod fell down. Never even had a problem with the old Murrays that had the Briggs and Stratton in them. Those things were just tanks. Had a 7-speed manual Craftsman back in the day. That thing was great. I mean, it thing moved pretty quick in 7th gear. It was a little overkill, I think, but turned a lot sharper than those Murrays. Those Murrays back in the day took the entire yard, turned like the Queen Mary, which kind of sucked. So I guess if you're looking at lawnmowers these days, if you're looking at Craftsman and Cub, you're looking at the same mower. A few years ago, right before COVID, Cub Cadet put the same fuel injected Kawasaki's in that John Deere's using, honestly. So if you buy one that's right before COVID, you can get a fuel injected Cub if you really want one. I don't know why they went away with it, if it's supply chain when COVID hit, if it stopped being able to source them as easy, or if maybe they figured out a way to pass emissions using the carburetor and thought it was cheaper and more reliable. I don't know. Again, John Deere uses a fuel injected one, the 590, but the 580s and all those are still carbureted. So I think carbureted is obviously time tested and very reliable. I'm sure given enough time, fuel injection is going to be just as reliable. Just like a car, we went from carbureted back in the day to fuel injection these days. So I'm sure we'll work out the kinks over time. Hopefully they already have. So really, if you're going to buy a mower, the things I would look for is what kind of terrain are you cutting on? Are you cutting on a hill? Because are you cutting on rough ground where you need a locking differential? If you're cutting on flat ground, just buy a cheap Home Depot lawnmower that has the bare bones K48 hydrostatic. It might only last half as long as these, but it costs like 1/8 the price of these. So are you really losing money if you have to buy two as opposed to one because it breaks earlier than you thought? The engines are all the same. It really comes down to me, the transmission. The higher the numbers, the stronger the transmission, the beefier the transmission is. If you get one with locking differential, that's obviously great if you mow in a place that needs locking differential. Other than that, I have not had any engine issues. So I know there's people online that have engine issues, but every engine I've really ever used has outlasted the rest of the mower, outlasted the deck. Speaking of decks, people talk about fabricated decks. The new Cubs come with a fabricated deck. The bad boy comes with a fabricated deck. That's the newest, greatest thing. There is nothing wrong with a fabricated deck. Compared to the cheap stamped steel entry-level decks, that fabricated deck's a lot thicker steel. It's going to last a lot longer. I don't think the longevity is due to the stamped versus fabricated. I think the longevity is due to the thickness of the steel. Steel can only rust so deep before the oxygen can't get there and it can't rust anymore. That's why if you go look at a 90s cab corner of a Chevy truck, it's rusted out because it has real thin metal. You go to a junkyard and look at like 50s and 60s cars, they're solid rust, but their trunks and hood don't have holes in them. They're just solid rust because the metal back then was so thick, it rusted down to a point where the oxygen couldn't get to it and just stopped rusting. You can look at this deck. It's a stamped deck, but it's never come close to rusting out. Nothing is holes. It finally this year, the paint literally peeled off. It's literally the paint peeling off. It's still a thick metal deck. You can see I did in that many hours, I did run it into enough things to bend that, but overall the deck is still straight where it needs to be. So I think the stamped steel deck on the higher end stuff is pretty good. I am not one of these people that ever uses a wash report or ever cleans my deck. I know some people will be like, oh my gosh, you got to get a scraper and scrape all the grass out of it every single time. Never done that. Never power washed them, never got them wet like that. Try not to cut the grass when it's soaking wet. And it's never rusted through. I kind of feel like a certain amount of grass sticks to it, dries out, and then after that it kind of maybe acts as a barrier that the wet grass can't get to the metal. So I'm not sure if that theory is sound or not. I can only say that having never really cleaned the deck, never really had a rust problem. John Deere still using what they call now this Excel deep deck. It's again stamped deck, not fabricated, but Again, it's a lot thicker steel. You know, I don't know what the gauge is, but it's thick. Still straight across there. I did notice on the other side over here, they went so far as to actually reinforce the deck. So I would not worry about whether it's a stamped steel deck or a fabricated deck on the higher end models. Yes, on the entry level models, stamped steel deck is probably thin. It may or may not rust out. I do keep my mowers in a shed. They're not climate controlled in that shed, so if it's freezing at wintertime, the mower's same temperature, but at least it keeps it out of the rain and some of the moisture. So maybe that makes a difference. I don't know. To me right now, the biggest selling point, or the biggest thing I look for in a mower is the hydrostatics. Buy the biggest, toughest hydrostatic you can afford to buy. That would be my recommendation overall, because ever since they went away from manual transmissions, the hydrostatic, I think, is the weak link in these things. That's about all I got. These are both good mowers. They both cost way too much these days from what I think a lawnmower should cost, but here we are in a inflation world, and this is what we have to work with if we want a, let's say, quality lawnmower. If you don't want a quality lawnmower, just ignore this video, go to Home Depot, buy yourself the D100 or the base model Craftsman, or even the base model Cub that has the open differential and has the weaker hydrostatic. They're not going to tell you that. They're just going to tell you it's a 50-inch cut, and you're going to think it's the same hydrostatic, and it's not. So I don't know if this video was informative. Tried to go over a lot of different things really quick, jumped around on a lot of subjects. For that, I apologize. If you did find it helpful, if you are considering a mower, do me a favor, like and subscribe, because it does take a minute to put these videos out and think about what I'm going to say. So until next time, I appreciate it. Have a good one.